3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome to second episode of the Coast to Coast podcast. This is Ryan coming to you live from Vancouver, Canada. We're super excited to be filming this second episode of our pre-draft series where we go over some strategies that teams are using to build through the draft, what building a core in the NHL looks like. We'll touch on a few teams we didn't get a chance to speak on in our first episode. Some other exciting things. Connor's got an interesting pre-draft model for prospect evaluation to introduce, and we'll see what the Canucks might end up doing with their 10th overall pick this year. So I'm really excited to get this one underway. How are you boys doing? I'm joined by Landon and
Hello.
Connor.
Hello.
Very nice, very nice. So before we dive into the major stuff, I sort of want to go over two pretty important things that are going on in the world of sports right now. We saw Boston demolish St. Louis yesterday.
Did we ever?
In Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. I just sort of want to get your guys' quick thoughts on that, if you had any. But beyond, Boston is really good.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first that we kind of seen Binnington really break down. And I think this is the first time he got pulled, maybe in his career. I don't even know, but definitely in the playoffs.
Definitely in the playoffs.
So, yeah, this is kind of the first one for the Blues that they can say didn't really get the goaltending that we needed, and the results showed, unfortunately, if you're a Blues fan. So, anything you want to add, Connor?
Well, first of all, Ryan, that intro off the top of your head, I don't know if you had any of that scripted. That was fantastic. I don't know about you, Landon, but I don't know if I could have
replicated that. That was fantastic.
This is what I do. This is what I do for work, man. I gotta have this shit on
Best
lock.
intro of all time. I don't know if I've ever heard a better one.
Intro. Thanks, boys.
But in general, I think, Landon, that's it. I think the story last night was goaltending. It seems as though we made this reference a couple of days ago when the Blues lost in Boston, but Binnington seems to be letting in a bunch of these 5-hole goals, and it seems continued. It continued yesterday, right? And I don't know. Ryan and I talked a little bit off air about how he's never really faced like a lot of adversity in such short amount of time, and he's a rookie. Like he doesn't have a lot to. I guess to draw back on in terms of big games or big moments at least that I know of, right? So
and I mean, how important was that the goal at the end of the first period? I mean, a lot of the goals weren't necessarily his fault. Like you said, I think it was the fourth or fifth one got deflected by a defenseman. So it's like you can't blame him for all of them, but the timing of that third one, which is I would say was the weakest goal that he allowed. Was that was the game right there. Is going down 3-0 after one period is like that's like you're not going to come back from that. But to give Binnington some credit, even though I'm a Binnington hater for sure, he is I think like 12-2 after losses or the game after a loss.
He does bounce back
or something like that. Or he's got a good record for that. But I mean. It's not the right time to be testing those stats, like in the Stanley Cup Finals. So it'll definitely be interesting.
Agreed. To see. I guess the only thing that the Blues can take solace in is that they're only down 2-1, so the series is far from over on paper. I mean, you guys touched on Binnington, so I'll try to go a different route here. How good have Boston's midseason or free agent acquisitions been? Marcus Johansson, Charlie Coyle are key pieces that are driving this team's success. And
Coyle's been their best player in the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
up and down the line,
4 points. No, he's such a great transitional defenseman, and when he's paired up with a guy like Carlo, he's sort of free to roam and not really worry about the defensive side too much. So I really think their game plan and how their roster was built, like we talked last time, is really phenomenal. But yeah, I just wanted to shout out those two guys, Coyle and Johansson, who have been phenomenal.
And just to jump on that a little bit too, like we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, how it's more about the depth guys around the edges. You need to have like your core in place, but supplementing those guys with guys around the edges is so important, right?
Absolutely.
And they went into the trade deadline and they added I wouldn't say depth guys because obviously Charlie Coyle has been a monster all playoffs. Same thing with Johansson, but they were guys who are like second third line guys.
Yeah.
Not like a first line, like adding Mark Stone or something like that, or adding Kevin Hayes for Winnipeg. Like they added guys.
Even Zuccarello to Dallas was higher profile, I thought.
Fair enough, 100%. You could definitely argue that.
I can only think of one other team right now who kind of hit the jackpot with the late season additions. And it's not in the NHL. It'd be the Raptors. I think the Raptors adding
nice transition, buddy.
Marc Gasol, I think was a big one. I think you'd all agree here. You know, like, and even some of the depth guys that they don't use as much. But I mean, there was kind of the three teams in the East that all made big trade deadline acquisitions. It was Milwaukee with Mirotic, who ended up not playing in the end of the Raptors series. I think he was benched.
Yeah.
So I would give the nod to the Raptors for that one. And then I think it was Philly with Toby and Bobby.
Yeah.
Don't forget Bobby. Don't forget.
No, they're package duo for sure.
Even though I think Boban's per 36 stats would be something like 30, 12, and like 4 assists.
Oh, he's the greatest player of all time.
He's the greatest player of all time. For some reason, they didn't use him much. I don't know why, but ended up.
They were just
Toby was okay, but wasn't anything particularly special. So yeah, I think to draw back to the kind of the building a core, topic that we've been focusing on is those guys that are not necessarily your core for a long time really do make a difference and are maybe more important than the core, as long as you can kind of keep on adding them and subtracting them at a cheap cost, because there are more players that fill those depth roles than actual core roles. So yeah.
No, that's true. I think that's a pretty fitting segue into game 1 of the NBA Finals, which we saw 3 nights ago on Thursday.
Massive game.
For those of you who don't know, Landon and I are not necessarily. I wouldn't say that we are incredible lifelong Raptors supporters.
No.
However, when the team does well, we can definitely feel the energy amongst our friend group.
They're my East team.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm the bandwagon fan, right, boys?
Yeah.
Jesus.
No, you're not. I wouldn't say it quite like that. I'm a bandwagon too, because I'm a LeBron guy. So wherever he goes, I'm going to cheer for that team.
Fair.
And now with him not being in the East, and you guys know that Kawhi has been my favorite player for years. So when they acquired him, that was pretty cool as well. And it's been great to see their progression, and just the fact that they're giving Golden State a series, even if they don't pull it off, which would be historic. The fact that they're pretty evenly matched, and the seas seem to have parted for them with the KD calf thing, and the energy in that arena in Toronto. It was pretty special to watch, and I know even Connor, as a Golden State fan, that must have been a pretty cool spectacle, just as a sports fan in general.
Oh man, like that's the thing. Like obviously, to be on the record, yes, I'm a Golden State fan, and it started around when they started getting good, so I guess you could call me a bandwagon fan essentially. But
well, no one knew about them before. I mean, the Baron Davis, Andre Kirilenko days were like, obviously Baron Davis dunked on Kirilenko. For those who don't know, go watch that on YouTube.
So
that was like when I first heard about them, and I actually like the Warriors too a lot. And I wouldn't say I dislike them now. I would say that I prefer watching their style of play without KD, because they're so fluid, and Draymond really gets to be the best version of himself too. And I feel like he got a lot of shit this year for not playing well, and really he just didn't have the ball enough to do what he does so well.
Yeah, and I'm like you guys though, right? In the sense that we're all from Van, and we all had the Grizzlies taken away from us early on in our childhoods, right? So we didn't really have a geographic team to kind of cling on to, so we kind of clung on to players, right? Whether it's LeBron or Kawhi. Like for me, it was Steph, because I loved Steve Nash growing up, and when Steve Nash got old, like there was no. I was teamless. I was also playerless in terms of, I guess, having that I guess a favorite player. So when Steph comes along, like before he won his MVP, I'm like, that guy looks exactly like Steve Nash, except like better even, which is crazy.
Modern incarnation.
Right. Exactly. Perfectly put. But I would agree with that. Like, obviously, it's the buzz around Montreal. Like, the bar that I went to, Like on the Google reviews, there was like no one in the bar. Like it was crazy. Like there was no one in there. And then we show up for game one and it was packed. It was just it was standing room only. We were watching the game from the outside. They had 2 TVs pointing outside of the bar because there were so many people there to watch the game. So it's obviously like massive for Canadian basketball, and I'm really excited because we all love to watch and play basketball. So it's definitely something that I think is just gonna blow up even more as we continue here.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm looking forward to Game 2 tonight. Like we talked about in Game 1, the Raptors were able to dictate the pace a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Steph played amazing, but Draymond had a really inefficient game, even though, he had 10 and 10, the baseline triple-double, as they say. No, he got torched. And if Pascal continues to play like that, they're going to have to make some adjustments.
To be fair to Draymond's defense, I don't really remember Siakam scoring that often on him straight up. Like a lot of Pascal's points came off fast breaks and switches and whatnot.
Yeah,
right?
In transition, for sure.
Considering that Draymond is the leader of the defense, Pascal still torched the defense. So,
no question.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what, because I think one of the best things that Draymond does is that he kind of figures out players' go-to moves and kind of studies what he can do to stop that move and force them to do something that they're uncomfortable with. So, I thinking now, I'm not sure how I would guard Pascal because his play is pretty unorthodox. Like he doesn't really have a go-to move. Like he kind of is very unpredictable in the way that his body is kind of like, he's like jello and it just like moves midair, and he's good at finishing with both hands. Like his lefty finish is like, one of the best for offhand finisher. So it'll be interesting to see what, for a guy his size, it'll be interesting to see like what Draymond does. I do believe he's one of the best defenders, or he's one of the best defenders. So to back that up, he's got to make some sort of Game 2 adjustment. So I'll be keeping a close eye on what Draymond does for sure.
I mean, and as a team, sorry, go ahead, Con.
Yeah, I was just trying to say, like, it was kind of cool because when I was rewatching the game and more looking at like the moments of the game, especially down the stretch, the game like the way that the Raptors won to me looked a lot like how the Warriors usually win games. Like it was crazy because like they kept the Warriors at an arm's length for basically the entire game. Obviously, the lead got down to I think 3 or 4 at some point. But they went on a run as soon as the Warriors closed the gap a little bit, right?
Yes. Yeah, the main difference is that the Warriors never went on that run. They never went on that run that just makes every other team poop their undies and just kind of abandon their game plan. You know what I mean? Like the Raptors looked very composed despite Golden State making it close a couple times, but never really let them get on that huge run that usually happens in the third quarter, but can really happen at any point in the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think of Danny Green's 3 late. I think that put them up 12, and there were only a few minutes left, and we were still saying this is far from over, right? Like that's how scary having the Splash brothers on the other side is. And Kawhi didn't have his most efficient game, but he did hit some big shots. He had that huge and one right before the end of the first half. That I think extended the lead to 7 or 8. It was okay. Curry kind of fell over, but I would have preferred to have seen a no call, if anything. I know we've both talked about that too. Yeah. Connor's point was totally.
Gotta understand though in the playing in the Scotiabank Arena, like the ref is gonna
sure.
Yeah,
of course, 100%.
I fully think that the refs are as unbiased as they possibly can be, but if you're playing in an arena with 20,000 people cheering for one team and yelling at you and stuff, like subconsciously you're gonna be scared to the point where you might call a charge on a very close call, right? Like
it's part of the home advantage, right? Like this is what you play for.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important in the NBA. But I don't even think that's being biased. I think that's just being human. Is that
it's just human?
Once they go on the Oracle, those same calls, the very close calls, will probably swing the Warriors' way. And you as a basketball fan, you kind of got to realize that. And cut the rest some slack every once in a while, because it is a game that's so close. It's like everything is very, very spur of the moment and happens in seconds, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the sake of time, although I'd love to keep discussing this, I think we should move into our NHL content here, and maybe
one last question for you guys. One last question for you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
Was game one the Raptors' best game in terms of like, is that like, because if you watch that game, like everyone hit massive shots at opportune times, obviously Freddie, I think Fred was what, two for two or three for three from the 3-point line.
Well, he's been shooting about 70% from three for the last 3 or 4 games. So
yeah,
Gasol had 20 points. Like everyone played fantastic, but there's probably going to be games where one guy's off or the other guy's off. Like if the Raptors play like game one, like they'll win the series. If they could play every kind of game like that.
This is what I think about that. I think the Raptors, a lot of the Raptors bench players were playing way above their level, but at the same time, the star players like Kawhi could have probably had a better game. Lowry, I think, only had 7 points, although he was doing it all on the defensive end and leading his team out there. Yeah, but offensively, they could have more from Lowry, and we've kind of all seen this. Like, there's one game every series where Lowry needs to kind of find his offensive game, but I think moving forward, you take away some of Van Vliet's. Like, Van Vliet's not going to stay this hot forever, but I think Lowry has room to improve, although I don't think he played bad in game one. I think Kawhi has room to improve, although he didn't play bad in game one. And, we didn't really see Norm Powell at all. Ibaka. Ibaka's been huge too. Yeah. Like he's been, he's been very underrated in terms of big game moments when he comes to play.
Totally.
So
he's the super
although
sub,
I think most of the Raptors bench players played very well, they still have guys who kind of could get going or could play better going into game two. So it'll I don't think that was their I think that was like a 9.9 game for them, but I think they could still have a couple more improvements to play kind of the perfect game. I don't think that was their full potential just yet. Just by a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree as well. For anyone who doesn't know, we're recording this about 5 hours before the Raptors play the Warriors again in game 2. So we don't know what happens, even though it's going to come out after this game. But next week we'll dive into the rest of the games that are going to be played this week. I think we'll be on game 4 at that point. So I look forward to that for sure.
No question.
Okay, so is that you guys satisfied with that as sort of the finals recap?
For game 2? Just as the last thing before we move on?
What do the betting lines say? Like, what is the spread, and like, what are we looking at?
I'll look that up right now. I'm thinking Curry goes for 40, Kawhi goes for 35, and whoever plays better on the bench, that's who wins the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty reasonable prediction. I don't have as much faith in Golden State's bench, unfortunately. Even if Curry does score 40, is Draymond going to have a more efficient game? Is he going to be able to shut down some guys in the defensive zone? Is Kevon Looney or Jordan Bell going to step up and be a rim protector? Like, I don't know. Is Quinn Cook going to hit massive threes? Maybe. I have a bit more faith in those Toronto guys, though, so I like that prediction, Con.
Yeah, the spread is minus 2.5 Raptors on Bet365.
Okay, so it's pretty much even because the home team usually gets 3 points, right?
I guess so. I
something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right, though.
Okay. From a fully biased viewpoint, I'll go Raps win a very close game. And for the record, I think Golden State will win both at home. So I think they'll split the first 4.
Cool.
But I think the Raps will sneak one out by maybe 6 or 8 points. And it'll be relatively low scoring. Curry will go off, and Kawhi will have a rebound. So I'm on board with that, Connor.
Landon?
I'll say, I don't know. My heart is with the Raps, but I think Golden State will win by like 2 or 3, like a real close game.
Close dub for the Warriors.
See, this is why I love Landon. Big unbiased guy.
Well, I think there's been too many days off since the kind of the thrill of game one. So I'm not sure if they come out with that same energy.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's a whole new game for sure. Okay, that's awesome, boys. That was a lot of fun.
It's an effortless 10 minutes.
Effortless. We'll recap the this week's games next week. So I look forward to that. We don't really have a smooth segue here, but
really.
Let's have a rough one then.
I'll bring a rough one in right now. Last week we had a really good discussion about building a core in the NHL, sort of leading up to the draft, and of course bringing it back to the Canucks, who we can all agree is our team, which is great. Should we definitely share something there? Great? No, it's terrible, but it's good for the chemistry of this of this podcast. But no, objectively, it's very bad.
I'm just kidding, man. I love my Nucks, man. Can never cheer for another team.
Too.
I'm impartial now, boys. Right? Like I can't have an allegiance anymore, which kind of sucks. Takes the fun out of the game.
Well, the Canadians are kind of interesting too. I guess you're a Montreal guy now. But I know there were a couple teams that we wanted to touch on. We didn't get a chance to last week, which were Winnipeg and Carolina. I know Connor has his peer prospect evaluation model that he wants to introduce to us as well. And then maybe we can chat about who the Canucks could be targeting with their 10th overall pick. Do they go for the best player? Do they go for a positional need? Do they try to fill both, sort of like they've done the last 2 years? And I feel like that'll be a pretty good flow, though. So does anyone want to start with Winnipeg or Carolina, how those teams were built, what you find impressive about them, and what they may need to do to reach that next level of sort of advancing even further in the playoffs?
Connor, do you want
I guess, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I think Winnipeg is one of those really, really, really interesting test cases because, like, every single move that they've kind of done since they relocated from Atlanta in 2011, like I think everyone can agree like they made like really, really smart and good choices. There are things that they really couldn't control, whether it's, the Trouba situation where maybe it's kind of a geographical thing where he doesn't necessarily want to stay in Winnipeg. That's kind of hampering them moving forward because he's such an important piece to that team. But you can't argue that they haven't put together like a tremendous team. They've gotten value. Like Trouba was ninth overall. Connor was 10th overall. You can go down the list. Scheifele at 7 or 6. I can't really remember. Ehlers at 9. Like they're getting guys like mid, almost in that mid round. Like obviously still in like the top 10, but just like later in that top 10 who have all hit and they're just good, like really, really good players. Josh Morrissey, another guy, 13th overall. Like
yeah, he's great, man.
And they have, and again, like those I wouldn't say those fringe guys, but those support players. Blake Wheeler, who they got in through the relocation, Dustin Byfuglien, like these guys, like are really good players. And then obviously we didn't even talk about, I guess their one true sniper in Patrick Laine, who's an interesting case that we'll talk probably about in future episodes in terms of the RFA stuff. But
we'll talk about it now. Believe me.
I guess we can like. But I think overall, like, you can't argue the way that they've constructed this team. Like, they're big, they're fast, they're skilled. They have a good goaltender in Connor Hellebuck who's big and, blocks a lot of the net. I mean, he may have gotten exposed a little bit in the St. Louis series in terms of maybe his east-west play or maybe getting bodies in front to tip pucks past him. But you can't really fault him too much on that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Landon, you can go for it.
Okay, I'm just looking at the salary cap right here, and shout out to capfriendly.com, great website.
Love Capfriendly,
fantastic website.
Yeah, it's not the worst. So basically, they've signed some real smart deals. I mean, I think Scheifele at 6.1 until 24-25 is that's the break. That's
Robbery.
The break that they got where they can afford to make a couple mistakes and still be okay. Kind of what maybe the Canucks could use here coming up in the next couple of years, considering they've already had some mistakes and don't necessarily have that steal other than maybe Bo Horvat if he continues his progression. But I mean, they've kind of handle their cap in a pretty smart situation here. Maybe paying Hellbuck a little bit too much for a goalie, but you can't really complain since he, I think, was nominated for the Vezina a couple of years.
He had such a good year, right? Like, what could you even do?
And I think one of the things that I was kind of talking about last episode was identities, kind of building with a theme, building with a purpose. Which I guess I got roasted for because I called the Leafs out for not having an identity, but I really like Winnipeg's identity. And one of the questions that I was kind of thinking about going into this year's playoffs was everyone kind of seemed to already like accept that, oh, the NHL is smaller. We're moving towards more skilled, smaller guys. That's the way of the new look NHL. Well, I don't think that that's fully happened yet because look at the two teams in the finals, Bruins, the Blues. Those are two big teams, gritty teams. Winnipeg is much like them. And I think had they not run into the hottest team in the whole year since the 2019 started, Winnipeg would probably be representing the West right now, maybe. But
you could argue that
they built a team with a lot of big guys who are strong, and like Bufflin from the back end is an absolute monster. Wheeler as their captain, 6'5", he's huge. Mark Scheifele, I think he's about 6'3". Like they've really stuck to an identity and a theme towards building towards big, strong guys. And I don't know. It seems like that.
But on top of that, all those guys can like skate and move
too.
Like exactly.
Yeah, we're not just drafting a bunch of John Scotts because that would get them absolutely nowhere. But yeah, you're right. So I guess I didn't really say that before, but the skill, but more importantly, huge monsters that they've kind of collected over the year really gives them a nice core moving forward. Ryan, I'll pass this one on to you if you have anything to add to what me and Connor just said.
That's on point. All their players are hybrids of, a game that we thought was trending out and a game that we believe is trending in. And I think that's where the key to success lies is sort of
somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, building a focus around acquiring both of those things and making sure that you're balanced. I think a really good way to describe Winnipeg is balanced. And in just like you said, their back end is comprised of very large physical guys who can impose their will, but who can also run a power play, pass the puck. Morrissey's kind of that smaller puck-moving transitional guy, and then they've got Kulikov, who's more stay-at-home, and of course Bufflin is just a legend in every sense of the term. A couple more things with Winnipeg is that this year they have 3 draft picks, a 2, a 4, and a 5. They don't have their own 1 or their own 3. They don't have their own 6 or their own 7. So they kind of did go all in, but they've maintained a lot of their future assets. Like next year and the year after, they've got a first, a second, and a third. So they didn't completely clean house. But with their $25 million in projected cap space for next year, how much are Laine and Connor going to eat up of that right away? Like I think 18.
Do you think Hayes is gone
like
too?
Significantly.
Do you think Hayes is gone for sure as well? Or?
Yeah, I think Hayes is a rental just because I don't think they can afford to keep him because what does Kyle Connor make? Like he's such a great two-way player and he was a catalyst for them offensively for a good chunk of the season. Even though they've got those horses in Scheifele and Wheeler, but Connor was scoring big goals for them.
Connor was better than Laine.
Yeah, there's no way they get him there's no way they get him like on a deal. There's no way.
No. I think you could argue that Connor deserves to be paid just as much, if not more, than Laine after their past 2 seasons. But I think both of them combined are going to be making around 16 to 18 million.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which only leaves them with 5 to 7 million of cap space, right? I mean, it doesn't really. There's no real room for them to improve, even with that Scheifele deal. Thank God they're on that deal.
Yeah, Ehlers
there's
a little bit of a mistake as well, I would say.
A little bit, but they paid almost for his potential more than his actual production,
not like
right?
Done growing yet either. So I mean, he could improve and make that a steal instead of
it's like that cost certainty, right? So they know they're getting $6 million. Like it's $6 million for the next 5 more years.
Yeah, it's a long-term deal.
And as the cap rises, it'll probably look nicer
I think
too.
6, but
6 more years for Ehlers. But yeah, Connor made a great point as well. They hit on a lot of their draft picks. Not all of them were, top 5, top 3 even. They were later and sort of more in the middle of the first round. They hit on it most of the time. They managed to make some good acquisitions in the meantime as well, and identify some good younger players who are now turning into stars who you have to pay. It's just sort of the nature of a salary cap league. So we'll see where they can go from here, but they won't really be building through the draft this season. So we'll see how they can bounce back next year. I think similarly, Carolina is almost built in a similar way. I think that they have, strong, talented players, especially on the back end. I think Slavin had an amazing season and was kind of under the radar and is a really great up and coming defenseman. And Dougie Hamilton as well really turned the year around sort of after the All-Star break there, when it looked like that Calgary trade was a disaster initially. So what do you guys think about Carolina sort of in the same lens that we were just talking about Winnipeg in?
Len, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, yeah, the Hamilton trade looked to be pretty awful at the beginning. But then again, he is the GOAT when it comes to advanced stats, I believe, or Corsi.
He is an analytics darling.
Yeah, he's the Wayne Gretzky of Corsi. So they obviously made those, kind of shifted their focus towards trusting the analytics, which I'm sure Connor will go in further detail once I'm done saying stupid stuff about it. But they kind of also were thinking outside the box with these acquisitions. I think after Ron Francis was let go, or I'm not entirely sure when that happened, but I think there's kind of a shift in how they were managed, and it seemed to be working out for them. Like, they kind of just snuck in there, but they don't really have any, major superstars. I guess if you want to say Aho, he's obviously amazing, but none of them are. Sure. Oh, you think he's like a superstar already?
He's entering that.
That's what I'm saying.
That
realm. They have a bunch of good players, but I'm not sure if they have any like superstars yet. Dougie Hamilton as their best defenseman isn't like a superstar defenseman either.
And
I remember the days when like Justin Falk was their like year after year representative at the All-Star game, and like that guy's not an All-Star. Like, come on, like so. They're not that far removed from those days either. So I think they've just built their team a very careful and smart way. And the fact that they made it as far as they did in the playoffs was impressive. But I think that shows more about what's to come here in the upcoming years. What are your thoughts, Connor?
Yeah. So like Landon, you hit pretty much all of the points. Like,
sorry,
they don't really have they don't really have like that superstar like right now, and I think Ryan and I both agree that Aho will probably be that.
Yeah, I think so too.
In the future.
I'm not sure if he was there last season. He was good. He took a huge step forward, and I think he
huge step forward.
83, 84 points.
Yeah, exactly that.
Right,
yeah,
so he's
exactly
like like if he improves at all next year, for sure, 100%.
So there's a couple of things, at least for me, when it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes. One is that they're not a cap team, right? They're a budget franchise, which is an interesting little wrinkle because all the teams that we've talked about in the past, whether it's been Toronto or Winnipeg or Boston, these are all cap teams. They all spend as much money as that they can, and Carolina operates in a completely different environment. The trades that they've made, like you guys touched on, like the big one which is Dougie Hamilton for Lindholm and Hanifin. But there are 2 trades that they made that I think really, really turned that franchise around. And one was the Tuovo Teravainen trade and the Nino Niederreiter trade. Right?
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
And I think that's, it kind of gets away from what we were talking about in terms of drafting for a little bit, in terms of like the smart moves that they made to acquire guys like that. Because they got Aho in like I think it was the Bickle trade, which basically gave
that second rounder came in a trade, I think.
So like it's just like they gave Chicago some cap relief in order to get not Sebastian Aho, Teuvo Teravainen, right? Like that's a smart move that managements need to look at in order to get quality players on their roster. The Nino Niederreiter trade, at least in the analytics sphere, like everyone, at least on day one of that trade, was saying that Carolina came out like bandits. I think we could all agree in hindsight as well that they were right. Nino Niederreiter was basically a point per game player when he came over to Carolina after that trade, right? So at least in the sense of like their management making very heady decisions in terms of improving their roster, I think really, really makes a case for them to be, a good team moving forward. And we haven't talked about their two biggest prospects in Svechnikov, who was a second overall pick last year.
He's a beast.
And
he's
going
to be a
superstar.
Ovi.
Don't forget that.
Oh yeah, it's
that's
DT
a
ever,
fact you got to put in there.
I hope he's okay.
He leads the NHL in knockouts via Alexander Ovechkin. Yeah, he's a league leader.
In knockouts?
All-time leader.
Oh, man.
All-time leader.
And then one other guy that actually Ryan and I both really like in Martin Necas, who was a star at the World Juniors 2 years ago, played all right this year. But he's one of those centermen. I see him a lot like David Krejci, super, super creative, super, super elusive, but also really good on the defensive side. So they have another centerman coming to backfill. Not going to say backfill, but to insulate Sebastian Aho. So I think they're going to be set up well for the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Necas had an incredible year in the AHL. Actually, his first full season in North America.
He lit it up.
He totally lit it up. So I'm very excited for him. A couple more interesting things on Carolina. The Skinner trade, which at the time we weren't sure about because, they were talking about needing goal scorers and then they go around and trade one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. But obviously a guy who probably wouldn't have re-signed there. And in the process, they end up, acquiring a second-round pick this year and a third-round pick next year. So kind of the opposite of Winnipeg, where Winnipeg went the other way and gave up their assets to acquire players. Carolina actually did it the opposite and managed to acquire more draft picks. So this year they have three second-round picks. One of them is from the Rangers in that Adam Fox deal too.
That's right.
And then if Fox plays 30 games next year, which I think is very reasonable, given how young the Rangers are and how well Fox played during his time at Harvard, that third-round pick next year will become a second as well. So there's a chance that they will have 2 seconds this year from other teams, including their own, and 2 extra seconds next year as well, which is just phenomenal. And unlike Winnipeg, they only have one massive RFA to re-sign, and that's Aho. And he'll command a lot of money. But sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I think they might be third round picks in 2020.
So they're exactly, they're third round picks, but like I said, if Fox plays 30 games, then they'll have that extra second rounder.
Sorry.
Oh, you're right. No, you're right. You're totally right. The Buffalo is not a second rounder next year; it's a third rounder.
Yeah.
So in the next 2 years, they could have 5 second rounders potentially, just through trading guys who they wouldn't have re-signed anyways, right? And then once they re-sign Aho, they will still likely have almost $20 million in cap space. Another quick note, I just want to mention how brilliantly they managed their goaltending this year, bringing in guys like McElhaney, who Dubas didn't want, and Mrazek, who was sort of a drifter, and making that tandem work, sort of like we saw with the Islanders as well, with Greiss and Leonard. This is a viable way to build your goaltending group. It doesn't have to be that superstar $6 to $8 million a year guy. You can make it work with a tandem, and we've seen that be successful a lot this year. So I think Carolina has a lot of potential going forward. And you think about Teravainen, Aho, Necas, Svechnikov, those guys being in your top 6, along with a solid and pretty young defensive core, has them set up to do very well in the future.
Yeah,
so very exciting to see what they do.
Yeah, I guess my only closing thoughts on that is, tying back to what we talked about last week about, do you need more picks or do you need more top picks? Well, they have both, right? They won the lottery. They got a second overall pick. They got a guy in Svechnikov who's going to be probably one of the best goal scorers in the league for the next 10 10 years, right? Like he's that good as an 18-year-old stepping into the NHL. The one problem I see with them going forward is probably goaltending. I know, like you said, Ryan, that they did a really good job this year, and
may not be a permanent.
Yeah, exactly.
That way in the playoffs a little bit with Mrazek kind of breaking down, even though they were able to bring in McElhinney, who won them a couple games. It was obviously that was the major concern with the Hurricanes in the playoffs, right? It's like what is going on with their goalie.
Sure.
But I think they do have that the American prospect Nedeljkovic.
Alex
I definitely butchered that name, but I remember
you did a great job actually, Landon. That was perfect.
Okay, yeah. And I think he was, what was he, London? No, he was he London Knights? No, he was like Plymouth or something like that, but one of the best goalies in the OHL for a good amount of time and one of the best prospects coming out of the O. So it should be, you should keep an eye on him for maybe the next couple of years and to have him taking over the starting position and kind of giving them some, some good tending of the twine moving forward.
That's true, and he actually played amazing last year for the AHL team as well.
Oh, Checkers, Charlotte?
Played really well in the playoffs too, so I didn't really know about this guy. But I guess that makes sense why they haven't really committed a lot of their cap to a goalie. They have someone coming up, and again, someone who's homegrown and someone who they acquired in the draft. And I think Brind'Amour is a very interesting head coach there too. So I have very high hopes for this team moving forward as kind of a dark horse every year because no one talks about them ever. Yeah. So maybe they'll get some respect next year.
I love Brind'Amour as a coach too. I think the NHL is moving towards these coaches who are kind of I don't want to body shame, but like they were like fighters. They were in shape guys opposed to like other coaches.
No, you're right.
I don't want to name, but are just kind of, like I think
Bruce Boudreau,
Hitchcock.
Was that who you were thinking of?
An absolute muscle man, Bruce Boudreau. I'm done.
But basically, I think as a younger player, you're going to respect the recently retired or the guy who still keeps himself in shape, coach who like Berube right now too is doing a great job, and he's kind of fits that mold. And I think that might be kind of what we see here in the next couple of years of coaching moving forward.
I think that's a really good point, Landon. I think that's a really good point, especially for me, like being kind of part of the, I guess, more of the analytics community. There's kind of been, I wouldn't say a divide, but you can kind of see that coaching is one of those topics that isn't fully fleshed out yet. Mm-hmm. In terms of like what I guess the analytical side kind of use it because it's tough, right? Do you want a guy who's more in tune with your management and understands maybe more of the I guess advanced stats side of things, or do you want someone who's able to control your room, have your players really buy in and want to play and run through a wall for a guy, right? Like it's obviously a careful balance between the two. But like when you guys played, like the coach means so much in terms of like being able to relate and like practices and one-on-one conversations, like those things, you can't necessarily, I guess, put a value on when it comes to, I guess, the analytical side of things. Like personally, I've had 10 or 12 hockey coaches in my entire career, and like the ones that stick out in my mind were the guys who were the best communicators, the guys who would explain things to different players for like different scenarios, and like would be on the ice and like would work with you. And obviously the guys like Rob Brind'Amour who played, I can't remember, like 15 seasons and
Stanley Cup champion.
No one was saying
100%. Yeah, like he's been through this grind, and it's not like he was ever like a finesse player in the sense that he's one of those guys that you'd want to play for just because he worked as hard as he worked his ass off day in day out.
The guy's also freaking ripped too. I don't know.
Man. Workout warrior.
Probably works out with the players, right?
He's probably bench pressing more than they are. But it's I think you definitely respect that in a coach. But yeah, Connor, as you were mentioning analytics, do you think now would be a good time to maybe introduce your model and kind of touch on that?
Yeah, let's talk some Canucks here, boys.
Sure. I mean, like I guess transitioning over to the draft a little bit. I know we've talked about building a core. Like obviously, in order to add players into your organization every single year, you can obviously add them in free agency, or you can add in through trades. But I guess the most efficient way to add assets to your organization, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, it's through the draft. You need to be able to hit on those players because those are I wouldn't say free assets, but those are assets that you can turn into something more than they actually are, right?
Mm-hmm. And for cheap for a while too, right? So
exactly.
So there's an article that I wrote. It's a model that I've been working on for maybe about a year on and off. Like obviously, with full-time jobs and stuff like that, there are projects that you work on that sometimes go by the wayside just because of time. But obviously with the draft coming up, I dusted off the old model and tried to build something that could, I guess, help us maybe make better decisions at the draft table. So essentially what it is, it's a prospect probability model. And what it does is it looks at basically the last 14 years, maybe 12 years of players scoring from different leagues, and it tries to assign weights to the particular scoring metrics. So things like what their age was, what league they played in, the error-adjusted goals per game, the error-adjusted assists per game, percentage of teams' goals, percentage of teams' assists, and tries to assign a probability to that player of making the NHL. And I defined making the NHL as 200 games. Like if a player played 200 games in the NHL, that guy was an NHL player. So it gives you a binary outcome, a 1 or 0. And basically the model tries to find if a player is closer to 1 or closer to 0 for that value. So it's a pretty simple model. Like I had you guys kind of look at the initial results, and at least the output is pretty I guess understandable. And I think that's kind of the goal, right? Like this is a starting point tool in terms of looking at a player's age, league, scoring metrics, his team relative scoring metrics, and assigning a first probability, and then you can go ahead and I guess look at that player's strengths and weaknesses and scout them. We're actually probably going to have an NHL scout on the podcast, so I'm super excited for that, and we can maybe ask him about when you want to go look at a player, what are the tendencies and traits that you kind of look for when evaluating guys. But again, this model is, the purpose of it is to have a starting point based on the past year's scoring rates.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I love your point on it being a pretty simple model. I mean, I think that sometimes with analytics in general, and especially in sports, we can kind of try to overanalyze. But like you said, to just have it as a starting point and to have it as an additional tool that can sort of help you group different players together, and maybe find different trajectories and potentials for players based on a very novel but also simple and easy to understand method could be very effective. So I look forward to the full scope of that model that you've created on a later episode. So thanks for sharing that, brother.
Yeah, and I feel the same way as you do, Ryan. Just for dum-dums like myself, you kind of have to simplify things for us to understand them when it comes to analytics. So the more easier it is to understand for the mass majority of it, the more effective it'll probably
fans
be, right?
and people who are following. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
I agree. So with that in mind, should we move over to some guys that you'd like to see the Canucks target, or who you think they may pick, and what their strategy
Hughes,
may be?
I would like to see the Canucks draft at number 10.
I think he could slip 100%.
Maybe he'll drop.
I mean, he's pretty small.
Maybe he'll drop.
I mean, I don't know. Do the Devils really want a small forward?
Have you guys seen New Jersey's Instagram recently, by the way?
No.
It's just Jack Hughes interviews. It's insane. They're already telegraphing to the world that they're taking this kid. And I guess it's predictable, but man, if you're a Rangers fan, you got to be pretty happy with that consolation prize in Capo Caco there. My God.
Yeah, no, it's I think Capo Caco, this might be a hot take, but I think he'll have a better season probably next year than maybe Jack in his rookie season.
Very reasonable.
Just because
Very
he's more NHL ready right now, and that says literally nothing about their careers, as you can't base a whole career off of their first season played. But
Totally.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Kakko kind of take the NHL by storm moving forward, as he did with the Liga.
Would you still take him?
I would still take him
second.
second.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very on the fence about this recently. There's definitely some weeks when I would say I was just feeling hot takey, and I just would say let's take Kakko first. But like, I don't know. The fact that so many of the U.S. developmental team has just had incredible seasons. There's one guy who's leading the charge there, and I think that realistically, do we see all 4 or 5 of those guys who are like supposed to go in the first 15? Are they all going to be unreal NHL players or live up to the hype?
Probably not.
Probably a lot of that has to do with Jack Hughes being as good as he is and sort of making the guys that he plays with better around him and slightly inflating those stats a little bit. But
yeah, and I think to that point, the Canucks released a video recently of it was sort of like behind the scenes, and it was Benning and it was Brackett and it was a lot of their scouts and management talking about strategy, and I think they made a point about from each draft you will find 20 to 30 players who are consistent NHLers, and that's out of 210, or how many draft picks are there in the NHL? Maybe even more than that, right? But that's an incredibly low probability rate. So there's not a chance that all 5 of those Americans are going to be stars. I mean, they may play in the NHL, but I really think that it makes it more challenging to scout and to know which is driving the. Obviously, Jack Hughes is driving the play. Caulfield had 70 goals, so that's probably not a fluke.
Turcotte playing on a different line for most of the year as a second center is promising. But for the Canucks, when you're drafting at 10, you want to make sure you don't draft the guy who was kind of carried or had his stats inflated to a point where he was, his draft stock rise to a point where it's a little too high. You don't want to draft that guy. I'm not saying that it's going to be Boldy or if Caulfield is a little bit to be honest, I don't even know if Caulfield will be around when the Canucks pick. To be honest, I think someone will take a chance on him earlier. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of odds, all 5 or 6 of those guys are not gonna work out. Or even if it's the defenseman, was it Cam York, who had a lot of points from the back end. He's kind of in the same boat as those forwards, as they were just scoring a lot of goals on that team. So
yeah, that's true. So thinking about that and with that in mind, there's kind of a group of players who a lot of people think will be sort of around when the Canucks draft. I think about, like you mentioned, Boldy, maybe Zegras, maybe Peyton Krebs from the Kootenay Ice, or Soderstrom, the right-handed D-man who played in the SHL this year. Obviously, there's Kaliev from Hamilton, who was a monster. But what do you think the Canucks should be looking for? And ideally, in your ideal world, maybe give me 2 players that you'd like to see the Canucks pick and why as well, if you have that.
What I was thinking maybe is like we do somewhat, I wouldn't say like somewhat of a mock draft, but just so we know what players maybe would be available, let's just use a mock draft that goes up to 9, and then we can say like with the remaining players who would 1 or 2 players that you'd be interested in taking at 10.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm on my NHL draft right now.
Okay. What is it? What's the order there?
It's a decent list. It has us getting Caulfield at 10, which I don't think will happen, but the list is relatively in line with what we were going to think. It's Hughes, Kakko. It's got Turcotte going 3 to the Blackhawks.
Okay.
It's got Zegras going 4 to the Avalanche.
Okay.
And then the LA Kings steal our Vancouver boy, Bowen Byram, at 5. Followed by...
That's an easy pick.
Well, yeah, I don't think I think he'll go 3 to Chicago personally, but in that range. And then we've got Cousins, the Lethbridge center. We've got Connor, one of Connor's favorite players, Kirby Dach, going 7 to the Buffalo Sabres. Then Boldy, Krebs, and Caulfield for 10 at the Canucks. And then after that, Podkolzin, Soderstrom, York, Newhook, the BCHL player, Kaliev, Thomas Harley. That's sort of the range that we're looking at.
Okay.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Landon, if Hughes, Kako, Turcotte, Zegras, Byram, Cousins, Dak, Boldy, Krebs go 1 through 9, are you taking Caulfield?
Yeah, like might as well. Like I don't know. Like
he's not. I know Landon's not that excited about it though.
Before, like I've kind of come around a little bit before, but like,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The breaking the record, Phil Kessel's record at the program is pretty incredible, and I think I was talking to you, Connor, about our power play moving forward, which kind of like got me a little moist, and just having Caulfield. Was it EP, Caulfield,
Hughes,
Brock, and then Hughes at the back. Bo
in front of the
playing
net.
the good old Todd Bertuzzi would be just incredible to watch. Man. And I mean, I don't know. Like obviously he's tiny. I've heard he's like smaller than 5'6", 5'7", but I don't know. I think that's a good risk to take. I think the Canucks have drafted well enough early on to kind of be able to take somewhat of a risk now. I was a little bit worried about, maybe if Caulfield and Brock are kind of two similar players, but you can always split them up on the regular line and just pair them up on the power play, right? They both have a great shot.
That's true.
Not like incredible skaters, but, a really quick release, like a good shot, which would just be killer on the power play. Do I get to have a second one, or do I have to just say Caulfield?
Yeah, you can go for it.
I was gonna follow up. Like, would you take Caulfield over Podkolzin? This mock draft has Podkolzin falling to 11.
I don't know. So. Like, Podkolzin is a weird one, right? Like, because his points just aren't what you would expect from a guy who used to be ranked.
He hasn't even played that.
He used to be ranked number 3 for the majority of the year. So you have to give him respect just because of that.
You do.
Basically what a lot of people are just describing is that, like he's like a freaking pit bull out there. He's like a plays with such an aggression, like, which is like, do we have a player kind of like that? Like, not really. Could we use a player?
Virtanen
maybe but that. It sounds like this guy has hopefully a little bit more upside despite kind of,
God, I hope so.
Not having really the stats to back it up. But at the same time, he played in, what was it? I think it was the Ivan Holinka tournament and led all of scoring. So it's not like he's just like, been bad for the whole year. He's had good spurts, He did not really play in the KHL. I think he only played three games or so and didn't necessarily tear up. Was it the NHL? Like,
that junior league in Russia, I believe. Right?
Yeah, one of the junior leagues. Was it Pavel? I'm just reading my notes here. Pavel Dorofeyev. He tore it up in that league, and Podkolzin didn't really have the same success there. And Podkolzin is supposed to go way higher than that other Russian guy. So I think, I don't know. I would take a risk on either Podkolzin or Caulfield, and I understand that they're not safe picks, but I mean,
they're not.
I think the Canucks can afford to take a little bit of a risk because we've drafted well in the last top drafts like EP, and finding Brock Lake was a great pick as well. So I'm in for a risky pick. I don't care. Like, give me a risky pick. I don't want to draft like Cousins or Krebs really, or Dax or Connor, but like I think there will be a great like safe pick, and it'll be a good NHLer, and the guys that I'm saying right now could be absolute busts. So it's riskier, but like I think we can go for a riskier.
Swing for the fences. Well, you know what? I will tip my cap to you because you did some very good homework, because I think Pavel Dorofeyev is one of those guys who I think he's slated to be like either late first round or early second. Mm-hmm. I think he's much higher on the first round list than he should be. So that's good find. Yeah.
I in this like little write up that I did, I have him ranked 22nd.
Cool.
Because
I think that's
reasonable.
I think looking at the stats for the guys who are kind of on the radar and eligible for this year, he's the only guy who's really torn up that league, and I think that kind of says something and sets them apart from the rest of the those Russian players.
All right. Ryan, do you mind if I go next? Yeah. So I think it's hard to pass on either Podkolzin or Caulfield at 10. I think Landon, do you remember when we went to go see that World Junior game over Christmas? That Switzerland
Russia game?
Mm-hmm.
That crazy game with like 2 penalty shots in a row. Like, that was a nuts game, man. They missed both of them. That was crazy. Like, I was so impressed by Podkolzin in that tournament.
Just his skating and his aggression. It didn't really matter if he scored or not. He was just
100%. He was impactful.
100%.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, not at all. I think to your point, he had an amazing Holinka tournament. He had a very good World Juniors based being like a double underager. And then he had a pretty lackluster U18s. So it's like there's a little bit of recency bias for a lot of people. I would put more weight, honestly, in the World Juniors over the U18s, just because obviously he's not playing in his age group, but he's playing above his age group, right? And he played really, really well, and played really well with skilled players. The one name that I would consider other than Caulfield and Podkolzin, even though I think it would be smart to pick one of those two players, is Alex Newhook of the BCHL Victoria Grizzlies.
I haven't ranked 11th on mine.
Nice.
Yeah.
If there was any guy in terms of international tournaments that really rose at the U18s, I think was Newhook for Canada. He was one of those guys, man. He has like one of those really high motors, and I'm going to be so interested to ask the scout that we're going to have on about maybe a guy like Newhook, just because those little things that the coaches and managers really, really like, whether it's like being in front of the net as a smaller skilled guy, like that's like a good sign, right? That the guy's going to go to the gritty areas and get those extra few goals of just being in the right spots. The guy can skate. The guy can absolutely fly. And, obviously he played against lesser competition this year in the BCHL. But he put up like basically Tyson Jost type numbers. And I think he has the skill set in terms of, the separating speed, being able to play with his head up for the majority of the time he has the puck on his stick. Like when I watched him at the U18s, every time he was going to make a play, his head was up, and that's something that Landon, I both played. It's something that's so hard to do. Like to have your head up at all times to make plays at top speed, like only the best players can really do that.
Exactly.
And,
I saw that a lot from your book.
Really high IQ guy.
Really high IQ.
Yeah.
And plays with incredible pace.
I'm on board.
Good pace too.
I'm on board with Newhook. You guys stole my thunder. I was definitely going to talk about Newhook. So thank you for introing him.
I could
for
see
me.
him being a good two-way guy in the NHL.
For sure.
Yeah.
His skating ability is transcendent. I think you could argue next to Hughes, he's probably the best skater in the draft. And a guy that it's hard to do comparables because each player is so unique and so different, but reminds me a lot of one of my favorite players and one of our favorite players, Dylan Larkin in Detroit. That's who I think about when I see Newhook play.
Yep.
And like you said, it's just his awareness and his ability to make plays in tight spaces and also separate from the defense with that speed. And he's super skilled when he gets in close. And yeah, he led the BCHL in scoring, which can't be a bad thing either.
Points, right?
Yeah, over 100 points
like
in
50
a
games
lower
or something
scoring
like
year
that,
than Jost's. Yeah, exactly. So I would love for us to go for one of those players, Newhook, Caulfield. I don't want Podkolzin. I don't know why. I just don't. I have a bad feeling that he's going to be one of the Russians who defects home and doesn't want to come to the NHL.
You racist.
No, it's not. It happens. We know that this is a problem in the NHL. But I have nothing to back that up other than I haven't seen enough of him play. I think he only played like a dozen or so games this season. And I don't know if he was injured, but there's just too small of a sample size for me to be comfortable taking him there especially with no guarantee that he'll want to come and play in Vancouver. So we'll see.
We haven't treated the Russians particularly well.
No, we haven't.
In recent memory, so
we haven't, which is too bad. I'd rather have Krebs than Podkolzin, but if we could get Caulfield, Krebs, or Newhook, I'd be very, very happy. I love that we all said forwards too, because we need winger help more than we need defensive help, despite what a lot of people think.
They need help in all areas.
Sure, we're one of the worst teams. We need help everywhere, but I think the more dire need is to get another guy who can be a top six winger for us, because we saw Horvat play with Schaller and Eriksson far too much last year. It was terrible to watch, and we need to be able to maximize our group's offensive potential. And I think that this is the draft to do so. There's a lot of good quality forwards. So
how about
I'm on board.
About,
I'm on board.
Kaliev then. He's not fully Russian. You have to remember that.
No, he's American, which you corrected me on, right?
Corrected me as well.
Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love correcting people.
No, I'd rather have Kaliev than Podkolzin personally. Again, it's more so just a factor of me being uncertain, and Podkolzin could end up being a way better player. Like you said, he looked dominant, and he looked like he plays with assertiveness, and he plays with deliberateness, which I love. But I'd rather have Kaliev, even though Kaliev isn't the greatest skater.
He's like the exact opposite of all those traits you just listed.
Yeah, exactly. There's questions about that,
but for Kaliev, although he I think represents the United States internationally, he kind of does, and he is like Russian as well. Like he's got a Russian background, obviously, but he does kind of have the signature like negative Russian stereotypes where like they don't back check really. He could work on his play in the defensive zone. So the same red flags that come with some Russian players, Kaliev also has, right? But I mean, I think I saw this stat, which was like, he scored over 50 goals in the OHL as a 17-year-old, and I believe like, Stamkos, Tavares, Skinner, like it's only all-stars that have done that. It's only
exactly
like surefire NHL superstars have done that. So is Kaliev going to be the first one to break that trend? Like, is he going to be the first bust out of those guys? Like,
well, that's what I mean. How can you pass on that skill? How can you pass on that skill?
Exactly. So, I mean, that might be a regret too if the Canucks don't kind of go for that guy. Although I've heard he might even go later in the first round. Like he might go 15th to 20th.
I think he'll be a big.
I have him 9th though.
I have him in the top 10 too. I'd rather have Caulfield. I'd rather have Newhook, but Kaliev is very close behind. I haven't actually made a list yet, but maybe I'll do that for next time.
Yeah, so basically, for me, I have about like 3 or 4 guys that I would be totally happy with the selection, and I wouldn't really complain if it was one guy that I had 4th ranked out of those guys or one guy that I had 3rd. I'd be happy with all of them. But yeah, I think a forward would be ideal, especially just considering that there's not really any like really incredible defensemen that are supposed to go around that, assuming that Bowen goes top 5 probably, right? So
which he will.
I mean, unless any of you guys are high on Moritz Seider, Soderstrom.
Seider.
I wish we had a late first. I wish we had a late first so we could get Seider, man. I'm pretty interested.
A later second or a later first round pick in addition to the one that we have at 10th would be a great time to take a defenseman, because there's a lot of options there, but not really any in that 10 range. So I would be pretty shocked if the Canucks ended up drafting a defenseman at 10.
Yeah, I agree. Another big riser has been Thomas Harley, who we had spoken about a little bit.
Best stats in terms of the OHL. Is he OHL or WHL?
Yeah, he's Mississauga.
Harley's Mississauga.
Okay, yeah, Steelheads. Yeah, that's what I thought. He's got the best offensive stats looking at the OHL guys. Like, much better than some of the other, basically all the other guys, I would say.
I really liked.
I'm on board.
I really liked Harley at the U18s. I checked with my my Ontario scout. He was basically my mentor, like when I was like interning at the International Scouting Service as like a scouting intern. Basically asked him like, if you could sum up like one word on Thomas Harley, what would it be? And it was yikes. He wasn't a big fan. He wasn't a big fan of his defensive play. Like he would sacrifice a lot to play offense. But I don't know. I think that you can teach defensive habits, especially at the pro level. And he's got like Ole Juolevi, like London Knights, like draft year type numbers and qualities. But maybe like a little bit extra in the skating department as well. So like he's definitely an interesting guy. I think I would have Broberg ahead of Thomas Harley, but not by much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair too. So yeah, that was a pretty good discussion. I think next week we can sort of zero in and like actually share our complete lists, because I haven't even made one yet. So I'd really like to compare and go through that. But yeah, we're all on board for a forward, for a potential top six winger. I think Newhook would be very, very interesting. And yeah, I guess we'll wait and see what the Canucks do.
What are we looking at?
June 22nd.
What are we looking for time now, boys?
We're pretty much capped, I'd say. we fulfilled our
we're like
quota.
70 minutes.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so it's okay. I'd be interested in, what I'm about to say we'll edit out, but we should cut down on some of the less interesting stuff. I don't know how much work it'll be for Felix, but basically
that's why he's not here.
We're at the end.
We won't tell him how much work it is.
Yes. So do you want me to go on the outro, or does one of you guys want to just take it and wing it, or what do you guys think?
I guess I'll take a stab at it.
Go for it, man.
Awesome, boys. Well,
I think we did a fantastic job today, kind of touching, a little bit of what we talked about last episode in terms of building a core, running through Winnipeg, running through Carolina. I really liked, Ryan, your I guess your quote on what Winnipeg is to you in terms of like it being a really balanced team. I really think that that could almost be like the segment title, in my opinion. I think the mock draft, I think there are some interesting players for the Canucks to select at 10, and I think that really perfectly segues into maybe bringing on this NHL scout that we hope to have interviewed for a couple weeks from now.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think I don't know about you guys, like as someone who kind of wants to be an analyst or to be able to look at the game from an objective or analytical type of view. I really respect someone who's really kind of day to day in kind of like the operations of the organization, who understands, I guess, the philosophies that goes into selecting players, and something that that for us we don't really get a view into. So it'll be really cool to get their perspective on drafting and scouting players. So I'm super excited to talk to that scout. We're also looking at free agents in this crazy RFA class, whether it's Kyle Connor, Patrick Laine, Brock Besser, Travis Konechny, Sebastian Aho, Mitch Marner, like Mikko Rantanen, like this RFA class, I think is like a stud group, and I think it's going to set a massive precedence for, I guess, what these second contracts are going to be moving forward. So
bridge is gone,
bridge is
man.
absolutely burnt, 100%. Like it's going, you're leaping into big money, big boy territory. So boys, I don't know about you, but I'm super excited to talk about contracts and maybe this interview with this NHL scout in the next couple of weeks. 100%. Yeah, you guys can all read it's called the Pper. For no good reason. It's just the prospects probability peers model. You guys can read that on the Fan Headlines website, where it's going to be posted, as well as this awesome Coast to Coast podcast later today. It's going to be live tomorrow morning, so you guys can all check that out there. There's some cool interactive data visualizations. So if you guys wanted to kind of look at who had the highest probability based on like their draft overall. You guys can kind of look at that graphic, and I kind of look at previewing a couple of the top 2 picks as well. And as Ryan said, we can look deeper into, I guess, the draft order using the Pper model as we get closer to the draft.
Yeah, I thought it was PPER, by the way. I thought you were making a play on the basketball stat. That's what I read it as.
That just
Pper is fine too, I guess.
Well, that just shows how bad of an acronym it actually was. Like, no one really understands what it is.
No, I appreciate the explanation. Okay, boys. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and look forward to sort of diving more into what the NHL draft is going to bring, as well as touching on some of those free agent topics next week.
100%.
Sounds very
boys.
good.
Enjoy the Raptors game, boys.
Yep. Well, I will try.
Breathe, Ryan.
boys.
Breathe. I hope you don't rip any shirts today.
No, the Kawhi jersey will stay intact. Don't worry.
Okay, boys.
All right, boys.
Don't worry.
Great to talk. Take care, boys.
Yep. Talk to you guys soon.
Peace.
Later.
We're live. No, just kidding. We're going to let Clute play you out. Clute is a friend of the band. Clute is a friend of the show. Longtime friend here at the Coast to Coast podcast. Check out his playlist on Spotify. He's got a short little EP that you guys should all check out. My favorite song on that EP is probably I think it's called Home, something like that. It's like Call Home, I think. All right. Hope everyone has a fantastic week. Have a beer or not. Watch a game. Read a book. Stay safe out there. Bye, everybody.